for many developing countries, the production and use of green hydrogen can help them achieve energy independence. Many of these countries are energy importing countries, so that if they can produce hydrogen and use it in their economies, that reduces their need to import fossil fuels. And so this is a big plus, helps them decarbonize as well.
Hello, this is the Weekly Tradecast, a podcast brought to you by UN Trade and Development. I'm Sarah Toms. We're exploring how major events are shaping trade and development and how that affects billions of people around the world. This week, we're talking about a potential energy source that could play a vital role in the fight against climate change: hydrogen. Clean, green and abundant, but there are challenges, not least that it's expensive to make and often uses natural gas in the production process. Hydrogen is also very flammable. To liquefy it for shipping, it must be chilled to just shy of absolute zero. Energy companies already make most of the world's hydrogen fuel, leaving critics to complain about vested interests. So is hydrogen a threat or a solution to climate action? Well, joining me now is Robert Hamwey. Robert was an economist at UNCTAD, specialising in trade and the environment. Starting out his career as an atmospheric physicist, Robert conducted research on the behaviour of various gases in the atmosphere and how they can affect our climate. Well, welcome to the show today, Robert.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be with you here today.
Well, great. So, first of all, tell me, what is hydrogen and how is it made into a fuel?
Okay, hydrogen is the simplest of all elements. It's a simple atom with one proton and one electron. And it's the most abundant element in the universe. Some 75% of the universe is actually composed and made of hydrogen. But there's very little hydrogen here on the Earth because hydrogen is a very reactive molecule. So in the early atmosphere, any hydrogen that existed on the Earth quickly combined with carbon, with nitrogen, with oxygen to form other molecules like ammonia and water and hydrocarbons. And so there's very little today. If we want to get back the hydrogen that is there, we have to extract it from one of these sources. Now, to do that, we have potential production channels to produce the hydrogen from water through a process called electrolysis. And the benefit of that, the advantage of that, is that this method of producing hydrogen is free of greenhouse gases. So this is the kind of green hydrogen that we're looking for. Hydrogen can also produce using methane, but that's a process that, of course, involves the byproducts of carbon dioxide. So we don't want to go that way.
For the environment.
Right. We're not solving the problem of climate change when we use methane to produce hydrogen. But using water and using electrolysis, we can do it in a clean and sustainable way without any emissions of greenhouse gases. So that's the benefit. Once produced, we can use the hydrogen as a fuel. We can combust it in internal combustion engines. We can also use it to produce electricity through fuel cell technology. Fuel cells are a way that you can take hydrogen, pass it through a fuel cell, release water as a byproduct, and generate energy, electricity. So this is the way to go in order to use hydrogen in a clean way.
So, Robert, that sounds fantastic, but is hydrogen really a practical answer, though, to our energy needs, or is it just a very expensive diversion?
Well, it's not an expensive diversion. It's actually becoming competitive in terms of cost with other methods of having fuels as a fuel source for energy. And so I think that right now we're looking at improving the efficiency of electrolysis, where we take electricity to produce hydrogen from water. And as that becomes more efficient, we'll be able to produce hydrogen in a cost-competitive way with other production methods, such as using methane, which currently has a cost advantage. But that cost advantage is shrinking in time.
Right. So what are the most common misconceptions, then, about the opportunities and the challenges of hydrogen?
Okay, well, I think the first misconception is that hydrogen is a limitless source of energy. We need energy to make it. So there's already a conversion process there. But if we make it from renewable energy sources, which are abundant, such as solar, wind, and hydro, then we have something that looks like a viable model to generate hydrogen and to use it as a fuel. The other advantage of hydrogen is that it can be used to store energy. We can store hydro somewhat, but we cannot store solar and wind energy very efficiently. We need to use it as we make it. But if we have excess energy coming from those sources, then we can convert it into hydrogen and store it and use it at a later time. And so that's something that's very important. Another misconception is that hydrogen is dangerous and explosive. But so isn't gasoline and natural gas. And so the thing is that proper safety measures and hydrogen infrastructure can mitigate the explosion risks associated with hydrogen. Finally, the last point I would make is that hydrogen will completely replace existing energy sources. And that's a myth. Hydrogen has specific applications in various sectors and in various regions of the world, but it's not the best energy option in many cases. So it's part of the energy mix.
I wanted to talk about that because how does hydrogen fit into the energy mix and what should it actually be used for?
Well, right now it's being considered as a very good way to power vehicles, transport vehicles, especially heavy-duty vehicles like trucks and ships, okay, which need a lot of energy, and they are able to use the hydrogen with a fuel cell technology. And so in both of these cases, if hydrogen is available, we have a clean energy source without any CO2 emissions. So the transport sector is particularly key for this. But hydrogen can also be used in gas turbines that already exist. We're producing a lot of energy using natural gas. If we modify a bit the combustion process, those same turbines can be used to generate electricity and using hydrogen. And that would be the second way. And that could be a very wide application in many cases where these gas turbines wouldn't become sunken assets, but they could continue to be used if they're converted to burn hydrogen instead of natural gas.
Now, what about developing countries? What are the opportunities for them to use hydrogen?
Well, first of all, for many developing countries, the production and use of green hydrogen can help them achieve energy independence. Many of these countries are energy importing countries, so that if they can produce hydrogen and use it in their economies, that reduces their need to import fossil fuels. And so this is a big plus, helps them decarbonize as well. They can also use it in rural communities, which are located far away from the electricity grid. And they can use decentralized hydrogen electricity production. And that's something that is very positive for many developing country regions that otherwise remain unelectrified today. And I think that the economic opportunity might be that as global demand for clean energy solutions increases, there'll be a growing market for green hydrogen. Many developing countries, which have rich endowments of solar, wind, and hydro resources, will be able to use the excess electricity generated by renewable energy sources and take that excess electricity and convert it into hydrogen through electrolysis and use that hydrogen, which is produced, to maybe export as a commodity to other countries where the ability to produce hydrogen from renewable energy is much more limited. They have more sun, many have more wind, and many have a very large hydro potential. And so for many developing countries, they're well positioned to become major producers of hydrogen.
So it's not just advantageous for the climate, it's also economically viable too.
Yes, it can be if the conditions are set up so that they can produce hydrogen in a way that doesn't deprive their own economy of the energy that it needs. But if they have excess and they can export it, and we solve problems with the transport of hydrogen because it needs to go on ships and it needs to go from one country to another, there are some problems there. The two problems to mention there is it going to be explosive? Will there be leaks? The second problem, which is
the temperature too, right?
There's a temperature dependency. Hydrogen at normal temperatures is a very expansive gas, and so it needs to be compressed or it needs to be liquefied so that it could be transported economically. And to do this requires energy that you have to get somewhere else. And the transportation costs could be high. So there are some, I would say, some technical issues that need to be looked at.
Now, what needs to happen then, and who needs to come together to make hydrogen into a viable source of sustainable energy then?
Okay, first of all, we need continued research and development to make these energy conversion processes involving hydrogen more efficient. But we also need to have governments to create a supportive policy framework to incentivize the production, distribution, and utilization of hydrogen. So if they have those renewable energy targets and they have financial incentives and regulatory standards and infrastructure that need to be developed, then we can definitely create a conducive environment for the use of hydrogen as an energy source, a clean energy source.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for explaining all that to us. That was Robert Hamwey, who was this week's guest. Tune into the Weekly Tradecast next week and every week for more insights on the most pressing issues around the world of trade and development. And there's even more on our website, unctad.org. I'm Sarah Thoms in Geneva. Goodbye for now.